And this is what we're going to do. This is your time. So I have some questions that I have about the 2 days, and they're going to offer some perspective. We will get you out on time. So if you'll just bear with us for the next 29 and a half minutes or so, then we'll certainly be worthwhile, because it's one thing to experience these 2 days. There's so much information, so many voices you've heard, so many models, so many ideas that I'm sure that are emerging. But what is the most appropriate action for you in your organization? So if you would, just real quick, Stacia, you want to introduce yourself real quick for those who might not have heard your presentation yesterday?
Yeah, hi everybody. I am Stacia Garr, and I lead RedThread Research, which is a human capital research and advisory firm. We focus on learning, talent management, diversity inclusion, people analytics. We look at both practices and then the technology that support them.
Patrick?
Patrick Coolen, I'm heading the HR Analytics department within ABN Amro. We're doing people analytics, of course, strategic workforce planning and survey management. And yesterday I had a talk with my colleague Luke on the continuous listening things we do.
Outstanding. Blair?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Blair Hopkins with EY, where I've led the global people data reporting analytics and most recently workforce planning team as well. We've been at it for about 5 or 6 years internally, so there's about 300,000 or just shy of that within EY's. So similar complexities, I know, to many that I've had the privilege of hearing in the last few days.
Outstanding. So we have just 2 simple themes here. It's just, where are you now based on your organizational reality and what your reflections are of this event? And also, where do you think we're going? So again, a bit of a reflection and also forward thinking where we're going. So Blair, if we could start on with your perspectives, where are you now? What are some of the projects that you're working on now? And if you want to throw in some reflections on what you've experienced over the past 2 days, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're like everybody on a journey. We've been on it for about 5 years, and I'd say the technology in the 5 years has significantly outpaced our ability to use, significantly outpaced our business partners, whether that's HR or the business more broadly, their ability to consume. So there's a lot of challenges that we've had in there. I think, reflecting on your opening remarks, Al, People Analytics 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, I really like the "and" piece there. Yeah. We do the descriptive. We will continue to do the descriptive. If we lose sight of the descriptive, we will lose the business, because that's what they expect to consume in the main. I guess over the 5 years, though, we've certainly moved up, and 3.0 really is our, I'd say, my primary focus. If we talk about from a leadership point of view, getting business leaders on board, it's all about how can we productionize. I think I used the word democratize analytics. The reality is, I got here using Google. I used AI that was using data from millions of people and thousands of people in London, with the streets and the speed and all that sort of thing for the taxi driver. That's essentially what productionalization means, and I think for people analytics, that's really where we're headed now. It's not about just the team and Tamika and my team that many of you will have met. It's actually what's in Tamika's head put into a digital platform, but in the hands of everyone across the business, not just HR. I mean, that's really where we're focusing on.
Absolutely, love that. It's I mentioned this in an earlier session. CHRO at Dignity Health in San Francisco Bay Area talks about through digitization and our work in HR, if we can give people time back, if we can digitize processes and generate insight faster and more appropriately, then we will effectively elevate their capacity to do other higher value things. So Patrick, in your work, you've been instrumental in driving innovation around connecting workforce planning and people analytics. Can you speak to those two and what you're working on now?
Of course. I think we're pretty happy with the people analytics maturity we reached within the last 5 years. And actually, if you talk about strategic workforce planning, it's a much tougher thing to crack. Actually, it's supported by doing a lot of analytics and survey management, collecting new data. But for me, workforce planning is really collaborating with the leaders, business leaders, with your CHRO, with all the people who are working within HR on rewards, on talent acquisition. I mean, all the interventions you have within your strategic workforce plan are coming from your HR colleagues. So laying that puzzle is for me much more complicated. And to be honest, I think we have seen some of those projects fail because of took too much time, stakeholder management. So we're struggling, to be honest, a little bit on the workforce analytics part, the strategic workforce planning, but very happy with people analytics, very happy with survey management as well. And I think the next challenge for us is, I think it's kind of similar maybe. It's for us to deliver instant analytics, right? It's about IA, not AI, it's IA. It's instant analytics.
Nice.
So being able, if you have a question from your managers or senior management, to kind of instantly answer the questions, and to do that, you need to collect and integrate the data in a much more faster way than we do now. Yep. So that's going to be a real challenge for us.
Got it. Show of hands, who here is doing workforce planning? Okay, and who wants to do workforce planning? Who's not? All right, so half and half. So Patrick, staying with you just for a second, and you might have to measure your answer here. I don't know. I'll let you do that. Why do you think strategic workforce planning is having such a difficult time getting whole? Because not only are you saying that, I would agree. I believe many people are struggling with this notion. Is it the lack of definition of what it is? Is it the fact that the world is changing so much that we're like running after, like we talked about earlier, a ball that may be rolling too fast? I mean, what's some of the struggle? It's all that. Yes.
No, maybe in our case, I think sometimes HR is too quick in taking on the problem. Let me clarify. In some the cases where strategic workforce planning really failed, our business strategy wasn't that well articulated. And if you don't look at a business strategy and you find the organization capabilities you need, you really can't go to the talent niche for the workforce, right? So that's a difficulty we see, and sometimes we just take the problem on without challenging actually the granularity of the business strategy. That's a problem, and those strategic workforce projects kind of fail sometimes, because then at some point they say, business, that's not what we mean with our strategy. That's not what we think is important. So that's the problem. We need to be very strict on the beginning.
Right, and what I'm hearing in that is that you're creating common definitions, mental models, and aligning this governance body or steering committee around a certain concept. Is that a fair statement? Yeah. So Stacia, you're interviewing obviously a lot of people analytics vendors as well as organizations that are using these tools. So where do you think we are based on your perspective and research?
Yeah, I think it's, when I think about kind of where we've been and where we're going, I think a few things have shifted. The first, and actually in the Facebook session, we talked a little bit about this, but I think that we're seeing an increase in sophistication in our users' understanding of people analytics. And it may feel like, whoa, I'm still really struggling with this. But when I reflect on where we were 5 years ago, if you started to even talk about regressions or anything that was not simple descriptive statistics, it seemed like business leaders would gloss over. Whereas now I feel like we're starting to see a little bit more sophistication, maybe not as much as we want from our HR business partners, as there's been a lot of discussion about. But I do think that's starting to shift, which is a really good thing for this space. In terms of where we are at this moment, though, and I think you just mentioned it, the tools have accelerated dramatically. There's a lot of them on the market, and part of the reason we're doing this study is there's a question about how do I plug them in. I think the good thing here is that we know that these tools will be able to take work off our desks, because now we have, I think, a clearer definition of what we're doing as people analytics professionals more broadly. The caution I would have, is particularly as we think about productizing it, as Blair was mentioning, is the tools need to augment our decision making. I don't know at what point they're going to drive the car,
right? Yeah, sure.
Because these ultimately are people and their ethical and other concerns. So I think it's going to be finding that right balance between the augmentation and the automation and where we need to insert ourselves.
Absolutely, agreed, and thank you for sharing that. And Blair, if we might toggle a bit, and Stacia just started alluding to it, is where are we going from your perspective? What excites you about the future, and is it something that, sometimes the future is really exciting, it's that bright light, but it's also the applicability of it, the ability to get, resources applied to it is a struggle in and of itself. So what's your view of the future there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because you've got this dynamic where, as Jonathan just referred to, getting budget, getting the business, especially large businesses like most of ours, to change direction, that takes a long time. But at the same time, as the technology is going ahead, we're doing what we now call pilots, not proof of concepts. It's a first implementation. So we're changing our language. Language does count. With artificial intelligence, we're partnering with another organisation to look at, it's actually skills, our people skills. So, for EY, we don't sell our people, we sell what's in the minds of our people, but they are our asset. We want to bring the best people to our clients. To do that, historically we've had, competency databases and, hugely burdensome, as I'm sure everyone knows. So, we've developed in partnership some AI technology. It scans structured data, unstructured data across our business, provides a score, a list, but it can do that for all 300,000 at once, not just the 1,000 people within the area that I know as an individual. Now that's augmentation. Mm-hmm. Why make the decision? I think where we're headed is that those sorts of technologies, when they reach that tipping point, mm-hmm. Will change the game, I think, from a senior leader point of view, and that's when you will start to see acceleration for these things. Another example, which if I was clever enough and I could get the right funding, is whoever invents that private data wallet that contains my data as a person, not an employee, a person, and then can transport that from employer to provider to restaurant to whatever, they're going to make a lot of money. If once the trust comes through, there's a tipping point. Once that occurs, I think we'll see a massive acceleration of the sorts of things that we spend a lot of time manually trying to do today, if that makes sense. So I think that's the future. So 5 years' time, it's going to be a real hard stretch. 10 years' time, it'll be much, much more than I think we can even think of right now.
So I just got a chill based on what Blair shared because of course, I'm a geek about this, but I believe it to be true, is that who owns the data? So if you have, and I'm not going to pick on any one vendor, but if you have a HR management system and you have talent cards or employee profiles in there, how filled out are they? How up to date are they? Anybody want to venture a percentage? There was a study done recently, and again, I'm not going to call it out, the vendor, but it was like roughly 20% of those cards were filled out accurately and completely. So that is not really good data, is it, when you're looking at the total workforce? So Patrick, going over to you, where do you think the future is going in our field, both in terms of not only what's exciting and cool, but what do you think is going to actually be feasible over the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Oh, I had 15 years in mind.
You can go 50 if you want.
Maybe two things. I think we're collecting a lot of data, of course, within the people analytics space. And a lot of people today and yesterday talked about employee experience, about all the HR and facility and IT services we provide. It should have a high standard in employee experience. I think that's also true for how we collect data. Yeah. So I think that's going to be a big thing maybe in the next 5 years. It should be fun for people to provide the data we need, which is good for them as well.
Eating Snickers? Yeah.
Sorry?
Eating Snickers,
for instance. No, but to be honest, we don't. It's kind of ironical. I'm measuring employee experience, but we don't use the experience concept for how we measure. So that's one maybe, and maybe in 15 years, let me try this one. We won't have any data scientists anymore. Who agrees? I'm sure some visionaries here.
So why do you think that
No. it's maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but I think you mentioned democratizing analytics as well. I'm not sure. I think if you look at the whole process of doing analytics, doing data transformation, combining data sets, choosing the best model for the question you have based on your data set, validating the model, that can be automated, I think, in the next 5 to 10, maybe 15 years in a way that we now at least need less data scientists than we do now. It has to do with trust. Yep. Trusting the algorithms and getting rid of all the biases. But in the end, if we have the trust, and it's easy to use also by non-technical users, I think it's something where we are going. And there are already some tools out there that provide you with a lot of those intelligence without really have to code. But all the data scientists, of course, fight this proposition. But I think it's a little bit further ahead of us, but it's maybe something that will happen,
Yeah, and it does, and I'll kick this over to you, Stacia. And we've touched on it throughout our 2 days together, is what does our work look like in 3 to 5 years? What do our teams look like? Are we internal change agents augmented by a set of vendors, or are we really going to be creating tools within our organizations? I was hesitant to say still, but some are doing some heavy lifting to create things. So, Stacia, what do you see the future being for people analytics leaders and their teams? Do you see more tools being part of their ecosystem? Granted, it's a leading question, but...
I think, yes, more tools. I would agree with the idea that there will be more automation and that there will be simpler ways to deliver data. I think that there will, for a while, still be an aspect of judgment that has to come into our processes. But I think that there will be more tools, and the tools will begin to integrate better, if nothing else, because we've seen such an explosion of vendors out there that anytime you see this in a market, people start buying each other and they start having to integrate the code base on their own. So I think we're going to see some consolidation in the next bit.
And I want to reframe my question a little bit, if I may, because you worked in the HR space. You have worked for a long time in the HR space. So we've had HR technology decisions based on, like we said yesterday, either improving or standing up a process. And it has not been the case where we've had selection committees or looking at RFPs, building RFPs to say, how is this new technology going to generate insight so we can deliver a better experience or deliver better insight so we can formulate better strategies? That's now starting to take form. So do you believe the ability or the way we're going to be selecting technologies is going to be different in years ahead? And if so, how?
Yeah, I think somebody who was up here earlier said something, I think it might have been Nikki, who said, don't bring me a cool technology, help me solve a problem. Yeah. And I think we're going to continue to hear a lot more about that, because if the tools can't generate the return, if there's not the insight created out of it, I think we're going to just start to see, we're already seeing technology overload and a rejection of that. Right. So I think that'll shift. One point I did want to make that I think kind of as I look forward to the future and what's going to change is I feel like to date we have had a way of looking at analytics that's very focused on either the individual or the team, but less on the individual in the context of the team and how those different factors kind of integrate and make an impact on each other. And I think that we're going to start to see a shift in that type of direction where it's not as binary as it has been to date. I think that's part of the reason why we're hearing so much more about O&A, whereas 3-4 years ago we were hearing relatively less. I think that's going to accelerate, and we're going to start to see some new ways to analyze those types of relationships that we don't have right now.
Got it. And Patrick and Blair, I'm going to ask you both the same question, but Blair, if you would go first on this, and it relates to what I just asked Stacia, is there's this people analytics technology community, which we're actually studying right now. Mm-hmm. If in 3-5 years, if all these technologies have analytics embedded within them, are we going to be selecting, people analytics technologies? And I often go, as I know, Stacia, you are, asking the vendors, who's your buyer? And most everyone now is going, people analytics leader, HR, head of talent, it's IT, it's all of the above. So, Blair, how do you make these decisions?
It is all the above, and increasingly so. I mean, we've started that journey ourselves. I mean, when I talked about the AI example, for example, that's not an analytics team initiative. We actually tried to do that on our own for 3 years, couldn't get the funding, right? Just competing priorities. We teamed up with our technology folks. What they want to deliver the same thing, but what they lack is the domain knowledge and the application. But they can get the budget because that's how they operate. So I think this concept of agile, not agile methodology, capital A for technology projects, but the agile mindset. Bringing teams together, we call them SWAT teams now.
Yeah.
Take them out of your day job. You're full time for the next 6 weeks. Focus on this initiative, but from across the organisation. I think that becomes increasingly prevalent. Certainly is for us. I guess the other aspect is, I think, with the technology piece. I mean, we've gone from on-prem. We're now moving to cloud. Most of the vendors downstairs operate that way as well. I think that. The future is going to be much, much more. I want this service for this time, and I don't want to have to pay an annual fee. I just want to deliver value for that. I might come back next year, but I think more flexibility in that respect will come through the market. It's anyone can be an analytics person now. The techniques we use for people analytics are no different to those that we used in consumer analytics for 40 years ago.
Okay.
They're not going to be different in 40 years' time. There's going to be smarter ways of thinking about it, much better algorithms. Quantum computing, they just figured out how to do multiplication this morning, if you read the update. Those things are going to change the game, but it's going to be a very competitive landscape, and they're going to have to meet our needs. And what we need is, this capability today and that capability tomorrow, but I don't want to pay for it for the rest of the time. I think that's where it'll go.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. Patrick, how about you? How are you all selecting? How do you foresee ABN AMRO selecting HR or people-related technologies in the future?
Well, first of all, I don't consider myself really an expert on the digital stuff, but I think it's maybe, if you look at this field, it's for me two groups. It's on the one hand, the tools that help the analytical team. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, all the techniques and stuff that can help employees and managers make decisions, right? So for me, those are two different groups of technology. The first one is maybe with my ambitious assumption that data scientists will disappear with all the self-service algorithms that may be out there. So make it easier for teams to do their analytics more instantly. And the second thing is, I think there's going to be a huge change in how we can deliver in a more flexible, engaging way all the information we get from all those research and all the data points and data sources and bring it to the employees.
Yep. Deliver value back to the people who are generating the data in the first place.
Yeah. So it's using the experience of tools to collect it and to bring it back, the insights back to the employee, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And we see tools out there, and I'm just going to mention one, Degreed. It's a learning EX platform. I truly believe that if we do something like that, I'm not pitching for Degreed, but if we do something like that, it's going to help us collect the data in a much quicker way and do our analytics in a much quicker way, instead of doing skill assessments or with a standard 360 assessment tool. So, and I think it's going to be more and more about, I think HR also needs to step up about understanding what's already in their HRIT platform, what's already there, and have a more coordinated discussion with each other, what functionalities you really need and you really want to invest in and maybe partner in with some of the vendors out there. Because now, and I'm speaking for our own company, sometimes it's a little bit scattered. I know some vendors, but people within talent attraction and succession management also know vendors, and sometimes they engage with them. But we need to come up with a better view of which functionalities really add value for our company, and then step up and start with the problem again.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. So as we start to wrap here, Stacia, and go back to you, Patrick, and Blair, if you'll wrap us up. Just closing comments, reflections, maybe words of wisdom for everybody as we conclude here. Stacia?
No pressure.
Just figure
Why am I
everything out,
first?
Stacia, real quick. Just for like 30 seconds.
I guess I would just say thank you to this community. I think that people have come together with an desire, an empathetic desire to learn, and some of the just how-to presentations, it blows me away every time I come to PAFOW with that. So I would just say thank you for that, and I think that we are all coming together trying to figure out how to do this work the best we can in an ethical, thoughtful way that benefits our organizations, and let's continue to do that and continue to be kind to each other as we're doing this work, learning together.
Thanks, Stacia. Patrick?
Well, definitely it's always great to be here. I think it's my 6th year in a row that I'm at this conference. It's always great to see great presentations and talk to peers. So thanks for that as well. And content-wise, I'm very happy we're in the middle of the shift where 4 years ago we did research for the organization or for the management teams. Now, and there's a lot been said already about it, but I like it, so I'm going to emphasize it. All the people analytics research is more and more focused on employee, if it's diversity or employee experience, it's all for the good of the employee, and I really like that shift.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. Blair?
I had the pleasure of also being in the PAFOW conference in the US, I think just late last year. That was fantastic. This was equally fantastic. I mean, I never cease to fill my head, if you will, with so many ideas that I cannot possibly go back and do them all. So, I mean, words of wisdom, just be purposeful in what you do go back and do. Not every idea is a good idea. Every idea is a good idea. Not every idea is the right idea to actually pursue, I guess, and invest. But I think be bold. You know, there are a number of people here, you know, panel included, that I have a lot of healthy respect for because they're bold with what they do within their organisation. You know, analytics is, I would say, one of the best ways for our CHROs to get the seat at the board table. That's our experience. Happy to talk about that with anyone afterwards. But be bold. You are their secret weapon, and don't hold back just because it's HR. So probably.
Love it.
Thank you.
Well, to all three of you, thank you very much for an outstanding discussion. Appreciate your help. Fantastic.